In American westerns, well-groomed, handsome cowboys battle filthy Native Americans, taking their wild women. However, in reality, it was quite the opposite. Women in Native American tribes lived in a way that modern girls would envy. I will talk about how they abused men, their wild family traditions, astonishing cleanliness, and military skills. At the end, you'll learn what happened to millions of Native American women and what they're forced to do now. Looking at Native American culture through the lens of modern society, I'm genuinely amazed by how Hollywood movies are entirely built on falsehoods. At a time when women in Europe were deprived of many rights, in Native American tribes they played a key role. For instance, U.S. founding fathers Franklin and Jefferson admired the social structure of the Iroquois and drew principles from it to create America's democratic system. In the Iroquois Confederacy, women were involved in important aspects of social life. They managed ceremonies, religion, and organizational processes, while men only performed social functions. Even the selection of a male chief was due to the decision of a women's council, which could also depose him. Thus, the role of women in Native American tribes was deeply respected and significant even in sexual context. For example, the Catawba tribe had an interesting tradition that caused men to have a panic fear of women. The initiation rite for boys into manhood in this tribe looked strange and terrifying. The boys had to spend a night with the oldest woman in the tribe, and she had to be satisfied. Otherwise, the boy remained for a re-examination. Moreover, in Native American communities, the initiative in marital relations often came from the woman, not the man. There were cases when, exhausted by the girl's attention, the men ran into the jungle and hid in specially equipped shelters. When the number of runaways reached several, the women organized special search expeditions to find the men and bring them back to the tribe to continue their marital duties. Savage cruelty. Speaking of wars between tribes and against invaders during the conquest of the Wild West, not only men but also women from various Native American tribes such as the Omaha, Cheyenne, Ponca, Sioux, and many others actively participated. These were not just frightened girls drawn into combat, but real warriors who were as proficient in weapons as their husbands and brothers. For example, the Texas Rangers clashed with the Comanches and, according to their reports, killed women just like men, as they believed women posed even greater danger than men. Moreover, the girls never surrendered, always tried to strike from below and fought to the last. An exciting legend about a woman named Trooper Bisonihi from the Cheyenne tribe became part of the history of the Battle of Little Bighorn in 1876. It is said that she knocked George Custer, the American commander in the battle, off his horse, which became the most significant military victory of the Native Americans over the invaders. Captain Robert Carter, who participated in the military actions against the Comanches in the early 1870s, described in one of his letters an Indian woman he encountered. She fights with all the strength of her wild nature and despair, like a tigress, using a bow and revolver, shooting them masterfully. This only confirms that women possessed incredible courage and combat skills. Indeed, no gender chauvinist could criticize such a woman and tell her to stay in the kitchen, and their family structure was very non-standard for those times. Native American tribes, for the most part, practiced monogamy, but also allowed polygamy, where a man could have several wives, provided he could ensure their material comfort and satisfy the intimate needs of each. Interestingly, if the first wife pleased the man to the extent that he was completely happy, he could ask his own sister to become the second wife, even without the consent of the first. After all, she's a sister. Such practices were considered normal and were reflected in Native American legends and traditions. One legend spoke of two sisters who lived alone. The first man they saw descended from the heavens and taught them everything related to agriculture and cooking. Therefore, now every Native American could have two wives. The way Native Americans addressed the shortage of men and regulated birth rates is also interesting. A woman could be a temporary wife if she was not the first. This status remained until she found herself a husband. These traditions allowed women to avoid the status of an old maid and not remain childless, which at the time was accepted by all tribe members. The attitude towards marriage in Native American society was practical and similar to modern times. Young people could live together, and if the relationship didn't satisfy one of the partners, the marriage was terminated. Thus, it can be said that Native Americans were ahead of their time in many respects. After all, the traditions of civil marriage appeared in civilized society only in the second half of the 20th century. One example of the very tender attitude towards women among Native Americans is the tactic of European colonizers. The colonizers realized that women in Native American tribes were highly respected and therefore often captured them to force the Native Americans to stop warring and collaborate with them. For instance, in 1868, George Custer's regiment captured about 50 Cheyenne women. To secure their release, the Native Americans agreed to leave the territory and move to a reservation. The Sioux tribe, in turn, expressed a special attitude towards women. We believe that a woman is much closer to God than a man can be. Women who give birth to life create it. They are holier and more spiritual than men. They are more important. It is noteworthy that even the right to divorce was granted not to men but to women. For example, if a man returned from hunting and found his belongings in front of the hut, it meant that his wife had decided to expel him. Interestingly, the man had no right to be outraged and was obliged to gather his things and return to his mother's hut. In some Native American tribes, it was mandatory for the husband to live at least 2 years in the hut with his mother-in-law. The man was also responsible for ensuring normal childbirth, and the woman was expected to give birth no less than once every 4 years. If the next child appeared after 4 years or more, it could cause dissatisfaction among the other tribe members, and other women would try to find out the problem. Let's talk about the biggest misconception regarding Native American girls and the tribes as a whole. It wasn't they who were the unwashed savages on the Wild West, but rather the pilgrims. The colonizers didn't even wipe their own behinds. However, it's important to remember that people of that era had a completely different worldview. The absolute majority of the pilgrims didn't perform any hygienic procedures, and this was considered normal. At that time, water wasn't associated with cleanliness, and the term cleanliness was exclusively linked to clothing. Thus, a person in neat attire was considered absolutely clean. Unpleasant body odors simply didn't attract attention of the first colonists, as a cowboy was supposed to smell like manure and horse. Fleas and lice were also seen as absolutely normal. The concept of cleanliness in the 1620s was also deeply imbued with religious connotations. Many saints intentionally subjected themselves to suffering on earth, creating non-healing wounds and neglecting hygienic standards. In contrast, American Indians who loved to bathe in water bodies appeared as savages in the eyes of Europeans, since a group of Native Americans standing under a waterfall seemed immoral and unethical to the colonists. While Native Americans saw a connection between water and cleanliness, the colonists saw only a deviation from medieval traditions and blasphemy. Not to mention the ritual of wiping a dirty behind, when these savages even washed themselves. Astonishingly, it was only at the end of the 18th century that Americans started to bathe in rivers, lakes, and the ocean. Now they boast about their cleanliness and neatness in movies. I would also like to emphasize that even amidst their warlikeness and uncompromising nature, Native American women remained feminine, beautiful and well-groomed, without the roughness of men. Photographs taken at the turn of the 19th and 20th century vividly demonstrate their magnificent national clothing and passion for decorations. Not to mention their perfect posture and mischievous gaze. In the culture of many tribes, women preferred to wear fringed, embroidered shirts with bead, shell, and feather patterns, as well as skirt dresses that highlighted their grace. Along with men, they exhibited a wealth of accessories: earrings, necklaces, rings, bracelets, and other ornaments, each symbolizing the history and culture of their tribe. Even now, many elements are borrowed by fashion houses, not to mention various body decorations such as piercings, rings, and chokers. It's also important to mention their use of natural cosmetics, moisturizing oils, hair dyes, and homemade shampoos. Some of these recipes are still used in modern cosmetics. But not everything about Native American women was progressive and ideal. There were also some strange customs and prejudices. For instance, during their special days, a woman became unclean and was not allowed to be near men, especially during meals. There's a legend about a Native American named Wisaka who beat his grandmother before a meal and forbade her to eat, explaining it by her uncleanliness. Moreover, women were not allowed to hide their menstruation, as Native Americans believed that if an unclean woman ate with others, it would anger the gods and could shorten the life of all family members. It's important to know that the caring and tender attitudes towards women were mostly characteristic of settled Native American tribes. Among nomadic Native Americans, the lifestyle entailed more contemptuous and even cruel treatment of their women. Despite having the right to participate in the election of a chief, women in Native American nomadic tribes were often treated as property. They bore all the household responsibilities, cared for children and their spouse. Sounds familiar, right? In some communities, elderly women were seen as a burden and received even less food than other tribe members. No romantic pleasures for the old women as in settled tribes were contemplated here. Even the question of feeding such women seemed like an excessive burden, as they couldn't contribute to the tribe beyond their useless presence. Another contradiction was the desire to increase the tribe's population on one hand and the use of active birth control methods on the other. Native Americans of many tribes used various herbal concoctions and magical rituals to prevent conception. They often resorted to termination, especially in periods when hunting could not feed the entire tribe and the emergence of new hungry mouths could worsen the situation. It is because of this attitude that women from settled tribes fought so desperately during conflicts, having no desire to change their usual way of life. With the arrival of colonists, significant changes in attitudes towards women began within the Native American communities themselves. Men seeking benefits or material privileges from the new authorities began to practice selling and renting out women and girls from their tribe, disregarding their opinions and desires. Although the practice of renting women among Native Americans was initially perceived as establishing friendly relations and did not seem excessive. It's like the peace pipe, but with a woman. Native Americans viewed the birth of a child from a white person as a pledge of establishing mutually beneficial cooperation and a guarantee of the tribe's safety. Some tribes, such as the Cree, even designated girls for renting to white colonists. Interestingly, many colonists married Native American women. This paradox lay in the fact that the girls' opinions were not considered, but these marriages established diplomatic relations between the colonists and the tribes. Some argued that without the participation of Native American women, it was almost impossible to resolve any issues with the tribes. Apparently, men tired of matriarchy and war gladly got rid of two problems at once. Native American tribes, which once numbered over 20 to 100, have now decreased to about 550. They mainly live on reservations in the United States, mostly in the western part of the country. Some reservations are located in the north and the center of the country, but there are few on the eastern coast of the USA. Among the largest and most well-known tribes today are the Cherokee with a population of over 330,000 and the Navajo with about 220,000 Native Americans. There are also other relatively large tribes such as the Sioux and Chippewa, each numbering just over 100,000. However, not all existing tribes have official recognition. Over the past decades, the Bureau of Indian Affairs has considered over 150 petitions, but official recognition has been granted to only a few tribes. Once recognized, tribes gain the status of sovereign nations, which gives them certain rights, including managing their own territories, taxation, and establishing their own laws. But even in reservations where tribes have sovereignty, there are problems. Many Native Americans end up unemployed, with low family incomes and poor living conditions, lack of electricity and education, high food prices due to infertile lands. This leads to addictions to alcohol, diabetes, obesity, and high mortality among Native Americans. Most young women are forced to move to cities or work in the gambling business, which has become the main source of income for many tribes and reservations, given the lack of tax restrictions on setting up casinos on their territory. There are, of course, women who earn money through handicrafts, ethnic crafts, and honor the traditions of their ancestors. But overall, the youth population is dwindling. Most members of Native American tribes prefer to live outside reservations, fighting poverty and returning only to visit family. It's sad that such a unique and interesting culture is fading into oblivion year by year. Thank you for watching.